David Lewis is from Corruption Watch. He joins me now to discuss why the SIU arrived at a different conclusion to Mr. O'Sullivan. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. I'm not sure how much of that conversation that you heard, but you may have heard my just wrapping it up, what Mr. O'Sullivan had said, putting it as best I can in that sentence or two. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, firstly, I haven't obviously read the report, so I don't have an authoritative view on it. And in fact, certainly the SIU have made it absolutely clear that their decision is not a definitive, or their conclusions are not as yet definitive conclusions. And I'm not sure that Paul O'Sullivan is not saying that as well, from what I heard a little while ago. So, what I actually am interested in about this decision of the Premier's to fire him, he's firing him basically because he has not met his oversight responsibilities. He's not firing him because of procurement corruption. He's firing him because, as the political head of that government department, that behaved and conducted itself not very well during the time of COVID. And one of those aspects of not having conducted them not very well is to allow rampant corruption to take place. And that's good enough reason to fire a political head. In fact, in many countries, Mr. Masuku would have resigned because of the performance of his department. So I wouldn't, start raging on about fixes and factions and politics. There is a good enough reason to fire a political head who doesn't perform. And, I say, Mr. Makuru, the Premier.
Let's talk about that, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Masuku, and this is also what Paul O'Sullivan was pointing to here in his forensic investigation. He says, on the basis of examining Mr. Masuku's executive authority vis-a-vis that of an accounting officer, he couldn't have found him to have interfered. So Mr. Masuku has been arguing that the issue of oversight, what exactly are they accusing him of? So I want to understand your point of view of this. Where do you feel he transgressed that issue of oversight? He said there must be a clear separation, delineation of roles where he doesn't overstep.
Well, I don't know whether he exercised oversight well or not. All I know is that that's what the SIU have concluded. And all that I'm saying is that is good enough reason. The buck stops, to coin a phrase, with Mr. Masuku in the health department. And if his department is judged to be proved to be systematically incompetent.
What a pity. Let's see if we can get David Lewis back on, because he mentions a very interesting point. He says that what is important is that the Premier has sought fit to discharge the MEC Bandile Masuku from his position, from his role as health MEC, for lack of oversight, as the SIU found, in contravention to the Constitution and PFMA. He says that is important enough, but I want to ask him, and hopefully we will get him back on the line, around the Premier of Gauteng, David Makura. Mr. Lewis, so the question for me is, you say that's grounds enough. It's an important point to make, that Mr. Masuku should be discharged of his duties. So what is your reaction then to the Premier, David Makura, saying that should the SIU clear him of corruption, then I will reappoint Dr. Bandile Masuku? Because for me, I'm wondering then, why fire him in the first place? You are saying you are placing the value on the fact that he was derelict in his duty on oversight.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe Makura wants to make a statement about the seriousness of the lack of what he perceives to be a lack of leadership in the department, what the SIU perceives to be a lack of leadership in the department. I don't think it would be a good idea to bring him back. But that's not happened yet, so we don't have to worry about that. What I saw in the paper, and what really disturbed me, is that all of the people who have been fired are going to be reassigned to or redeployed, as we say, to the Gauteng legislature. I think that's absolutely terrible. You don't get rid of people for corruption or poor leadership or whatever it is, and then send them to the legislature. What do they think the legislature is? A sort of a dustbin for failed politicians and officials.
So, Paul O'Sullivan calls the SIU findings in themselves unconstitutional, saying that Bandile Masuku has not been accorded his rights, saying that the SIU has not made public the allegations, and therefore this is what makes it unconstitutional. What is your point of view of that?
I don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure if Mr. Masuku believes that, and his legal advisors believe that strongly enough, then they'll challenge it.
All right, thank you very much.
We have courts.
All right, thank you very much. David Lewis from Corruption Watch, speaking about why the SIU arrived at a different conclusion to Paul O'Sullivan, forensic consultant who cleared Bandile Masuku of wrongdoing, saying that there's not a shred of evidence. Anybody who has any should present it.